Hey there. I'm excited to announce this to you today. This is what you've been waiting for in your spiritual quest. This is something I've wanted to do for a long time, and I'm finally ready to announce it that it's ready to go. It's the Grief to Growth Community Circle. Now, this is a sanctuary where like-minded souls are united in their journey through grief and towards personal transformation. It's more than just a place. It's a beginning. It's a commitment to growth and understanding. Here you're finding not just a community, but you're entering a circle of trust and depth. You're going to engage with interactive coursework. You'll dive into exclusive podcast episodes and partake in discussions that illuminate the path from mourning to empowerment. This is a realm where every question is honored and every individual's journey is validated. To be part of this exclusive circle, visit us at grieftogrowth.com/community or look for the chat icon at the bottom of every page on the main website. Remember that entry is a privilege because I want to ensure that every member is as dedicated and genuine as you are. You must apply to join, but the journey within is worth every step. So go ahead and join us today. Check it out, grieftogrowth.com/community, and I look forward to seeing you there. Hey there, welcome back to another episode of Grief to Growth podcast, where we explore the multifaceted nature of grief and the lessons it can teach us about life, about love, about the strength of the human spirit. I'm your host, Brian Smith, and today I have the privilege of introducing a guest whose life's tapestry is woven with threads of education, of advocacy, and the enduring power of storytelling. Please join me in welcoming Kevin O'Connor. Kevin is not only a seasoned educator and a fierce advocate for LGBTQ rights and sexual health, but he's also an accomplished author and performer whose voice has graced both the page and the stage. His latest work we're going to talk about today is his book, 2 Floors Above Grief, and it's a poignant exploration of life as a son of a funeral director and the rich legacy of family stories told through letters. In today's conversation, we'll talk about Kevin's experiences. We'll discuss the intricacies of starting and maintaining a business, of nurturing marriage and family life within the unique context of the funeral industry, and the ways in which personal grief intertwines with the grief of others. And we'll talk about his insights on sharing or enriching family history by organizing ancestors' letters, revealing the powerful continuity and connections that they hold. So I think this is an episode that promises to touch on the practicalities of life amidst death, but also talk about the emotional and spiritual growth that can emerge from such experiences. So with that, I want to welcome to Grief to Growth, Kevin O'Connor.
Brian, that was a wonder. Thank you for that introduction. I haven't had a podcast host take what I gave them and really make it your own. I'm thinking I may use what you just wrote as the next blurb from my book because it may help with the marketing. But that was eloquent what you said. Thanks very much.
Well, thanks
very much.
It's good to meet you. It's great to have you here today. I know you have a very unusual story. So your book is 2 Floors Above Grief. I would say you grew up above a funeral home, but you actually grew up in a funeral home. So, and I know there were some unique things other than just the fact that you grew up in a funeral home. So tell me about that experience.
Well, just the idea when I first ventured into writing this book, I've been writing it I'm 73 years old. I've been writing it for 73 years, I think. That's the stories and things, and the influence and the experiences started at birth, actually. My dad was already well established in the funeral home industry by the time I was born. And when in part of the title, it talks about the unique place we called home. It's not so much unique to have a funeral home family live near or in or above or next to a funeral home. That was especially true before the advent of internet and cell phones and ways to communicate, because a funeral home owner needed to be right on the premises at all times, because death happens, as you talk about on your other podcasts that I've listened to. Death has no schedule. It happens at any time.
Right. So
in our case, my dad and my uncle operated this funeral home in a Victorian house that they had purchased in the late 30s, converted the first floor into a funeral home, and the top 2 floors were converted into apartments. Second floor was where my aunt and uncle and their 3 daughters lived, and my mom and dad and my 2 brothers and I lived in the 3rd floor. Another thing, I guess, there's a lot of unique things about the house itself. If you or your listeners just picture an old Victorian house, they usually aren't built to be a funeral home. they're
Mhm.
they're built on the first floor with welcoming parlors and butlers' kitchens and dining areas, and the second floor is usually bedrooms, and then the third floor in this particular house was a ballroom. It had two stages in it, beautiful hardwood floors, and two stages. So when my mom and dad moved in with my older brother in 1940, he was just a baby. They needed to convert this space of a ballroom into their apartment. And so they put up walls and designed and created bedrooms and kitchens and a bathroom. But what one thing they didn't do, and I don't know why, initially for the first 10 years, well, for the first 15 years they lived there, they kept the stages there. So my bedroom had my brother's bedroom, and we had a stage in the bedroom, and then the room that was designated we called the back room, but essentially it's what most families would call a family room. That also had a stage in it.
Hmm.
So you mentioned in your intro that I like to perform on stage, and I think that's partly because my crib and my twin bed, and up until I was age 9, my bed or crib was right next to this stage.
Wow.
And so it wasn't unusual for me or my brothers or my cousins or friends to get up on the stage and put on plays. And there was an area underneath the stage that my parents used for storage, but it was great for kid games and hiding and hide and go seek and things like that, just to do stuff in a play mode. But and the other unique thing, on top of being just living in a funeral home, the other unique thing about the two families was for me to get to the apartment where I lived on the third floor, where my mom and dad and two brothers lived. I had to walk through the apartment of my aunt and uncle and
Hmm.
my three cousins who are a little older than me. So so the concept of privacy, when my dad and uncle decided to create this living environment, I'm pretty sure they knew that they were giving up some privacy, especially for my aunt and uncle. We actually, on the third floor, had a little more privacy. But for me, it wasn't unusual for me to come up the back stairs after playing or coming home from school. And as I stepped off the top step on the first set of stairs, I was right next to my aunt's kitchen, that was usually where she was. She would greet me. She'd ask how my day was. My uncle might be around. My cousins might be in and out. Uh, and so the idea that I had really two sets of parents, and that's what I talk about in the book too. That what made it unique was I had two sets of parents, people that for the most part, 98% part, I guess, got along.
Hmm.
So it was a bonus that these two brothers decided to have this business. But again, the families got along. And
Hmm.
even in I point out in the book that in the 1950s census that was just released in the last year or so, I went and looked at it, and it listed my three cousins and myself and my older brother. My younger brother hadn't been born yet, but it listed us as brothers and sisters.
Hmm.
So we always teased each other that we were raised as brothers and sisters in this environment. And then I just felt, gee, this is the census taker sort of confirmed that in 1950. And the cousins have passed on, so that's part of my grief story too.
Hmm.
Out of the 10 of us that live there, it's just myself and my two brothers that are still in this area of living
Hmm.
on Earth.
Hmm.
Everybody else has passed on, but those are, I think, some of the. In answer to your questions, that's just some of what made it unique. I address other things throughout the book, but those are the primary things that I think made my upbringing a little unique. And I didn't. I knew it was unique when I was growing up, but I guess I've realized it even more in the writing of the book and since the
Hmm.
book was published. I think as people comment on things, and I have podcasts with folks like yourself or make presentations, that people say, "Wow, that was really interesting that you're born in a funeral home." So here I am talking to you.
Yeah, yeah, that is really, interesting. And death is something in our society that we don't talk about, we try to avoid. So I can only imagine what it was like for you growing up with, people grieving people coming in and stuff. So I'm sure when you were a child, you didn't realize how unique it was. But since then, have you I thought about how this has informed the way you think about death and about grieving?
Oh yeah, yeah. Um, I get that a similar question a lot of times. Do I think I perceive death and grief any differently than somebody who might not have lived in that environment? And I guess one of the things I've come to understand is I've had many a death experience in my life and many grief experiences, and talking to friends and family, I really don't think my approach to it is it probably any different.
Hmm.
Yes, I think it's probably it was I learned at an early age that death can happen at any time, that there is no schedule. I know you know that all too well,
Hmm.
um, based on your podcast that I've listened to. But on the other hand, when it does happen, when death happens, the impact it's had on me is similar to anybody else I've spoken to. It's a you mentioned earlier. Let's see, multifaceted. I wrote that down. The multi-tiered, multifaceted aspects. I just one of my closest cousin died 2 weeks ago today at age 90, and we gathered for her services in Indiana, and she was a cousin of the undertaking family, so she was all very familiar,
Hmm.
and grew up not growing up in the house, but spent a lot of time there. But and certainly these early 2 weeks, and she had prepared me for her going, and she had she was a Catholic sister, Catholic nun,
Hmm.
and and I talked to her 2, 3 times a month, and in the last few years, she's just been telling me I'm ready to go, and she stayed very active and alert, still in a bed a lot, but her mind was really good. And even in my last conversation with her 3 weeks ago, she was talking about, I'm ready now, I'm ready. And she just passed away in her sleep 2 weeks ago. So, and that's those kind of situations aren't, I'm not a stranger to that, or all the other ways people pass on or people die. I mean,
Hmm.
she certainly died in a way that she'd almost prescribed for herself, fortunately, but in a quiet way, and in a way that just at age 90, that her body led her to that.
Hmm.
Certainly other times of death, they're a lot more shocking. So I think that
Yeah.
answers your question. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I'm just, and again, I know it's hard to compare our childhood to other people's childhoods because we don't know what their childhood was like. But I can imagine that, did your father and your uncle talk about like the clients that were coming through and various, because as you said, people die all kinds of ways. We think of people as dying. We like to think people, everybody's old when they die. They all die quietly in their
Hmm.
bed.
Right,
So
right.
what were your experiences like in finding out, like, death can happen at any time to anyone?
Thanks for that question. I think certainly I was aware when the phone would ring in the middle of the night, and I would hear my dad. He had it on our third floor an apartment. As phone systems changed in the 50s and 60s, we had more extensions in the house.
Mm.
So the phone would ring, and I would wake up a little bit, and I'd hear my dad's, "I'll be right there, I'll be right there," and then I would hear him put the phone down. I was probably asleep most times by the time he reached, by he left the apartment, or then I might hear him when he came back later to wake me up to go to school or whatever. So I
Hmm.
was very aware of how that happens at any time of the day, or even if in the middle of the day, if the phone rang, even in the middle of dinner, if the phone rang and Dad answered
Sure.
it, and he just left. He just left. Whether it was that, we also provided ambulance calls. So because there were no paramedics in those 50s and 60s, the funeral homes in our town took care of that. So those kind of things that happen became a part of life for me.
Hmm.
The suddenness, the spontaneity of it, I guess, for lack of a better word. But to go back to another part of your question, did I think yeah, you ask if what did I know about the clients? What did I know? What did my dad or uncle or my mom or aunt share, that was very, I respect them more and more for this as I get older. And as I've learned more about this, they didn't involve us too much in the clients. I mean, I certainly some of the families I knew because they were related to us or they were friends of the family. But even with those details, Dad and my uncle never talked about the process or the preparation process of the physical preparation process. And if there was things that happen, certain aspects of this, a particular client's death or a family situation, I was never aware of that. And I people will ask me, how come you don't know so much about the business? Because I never went into it myself.
Sure.
I said I really think that that's a credit to my parents. And then just in the last 3 weeks or no, yeah, 3 months, I came across through a cousin. She found a plaque that had been hanging in the preparation room of the funeral home. And I don't have it in front of me, but the gist of the saying was speaking to the embalmer, the undertaker, and it was saying in a general sense, hey, this family entrusted this person to you. It's up to you. You have the responsibility to be discreet, to take very good care, and to be responsible for this person because this person belongs to a family.
Right.
And there were no don'ts in the thing, but the message was, this is private. And it's not a funeral director's purvey to go talking about their clients to their family, to their friends, to their organizations. And I never knew my dad or uncle to do that. So yeah, I was aware there was funerals. I was aware there was a family gathering, and certainly I helped in different ways in the funeral home, whether it be setting up flowers, putting up chairs, greeting people at the door, running, going on errands for my dad to different things, especially when I started driving. But I didn't know a lot of what should I say, the factors, and I've learned that since there's other podcasts, you may be familiar with some of them. There's other podcasts available where funeral directors speak directly to their experiences and what happened at the moment of death with this person. And some of those circumstances are pretty gruesome.
Right.
And when I've been listening to those, I'm thinking, oh, gee, my dad and uncle must have experienced that, but I never would have known that, and it helped me understand listening to these other people's podcasts, and most of them being funeral directors, just some of the more of the background that my dad and uncle chose not to share with us as a family. So I really give them they've been gone a long time, but it increases the respect I have for them and the respect they had for the families with whom they worked.
Sure. So your father and your uncle that started so this was not a business that your family was in before that your father and your uncle decided to start it. Is that correct?
Oh, my uncle started. He's about 8 years older than my dad, and he had got interested in it as a 20-something. When he lived in Hammond, Indiana, he had worked for a funeral home there in Hammond, Indiana. And but he wanted to have a funeral home of his own, and there just wasn't an opportunity in that area of Indiana, in Hammond, Gary, that area. This is 1929, 1930. So you look at the economic times, right in the Depression. But and he got married in 1930 to my aunt, and he said he conceived of a plan which she knew a little bit about, but he made some decisions without her, I think. He said, well, I got a chance to move to this town called Elgin, Illinois, and I've got an opportunity to start a funeral home and rent a house there to get us started. And she says, what? We're just getting married. She went along with him. And I think that was more what brides may have done in 1930.
Yeah.
And so he started it and moved to Elgin, which was about 2.5 hours at the time, 2.5 to 3 hours away from where he grew up. And he moved into this town where he knew nobody except maybe the one person who said there might be an opportunity for him. And he took my dad with him. My dad was a high school student at the time, but he took my dad and my dad's sister with him and his parents, my grandparents, and they all worked the funeral home together. And my dad finished high school there and then decided to join and met my mom, and she was from the town. So my Uncle Lawrence started it first, and then Dad came in about 8-9 years later.
Wow.
So, and then they stayed together as partners until 84. My dad died in 84. So and then the business was sold right about that time.
Okay.
So when that happened. Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, did you ever consider going into the business?
Yeah, my brothers and I have this conversation. I talk in the book too. When my cousins, they were, let's see, the oldest one was 19 years older than me, and the youngest one was 14 years older than me. So
Oh, wow.
they were coming of age in the late 40s and 50s,
Mm-hmm.
and there wasn't an opportunity for them at that time. It wasn't even considered a role for women at the time. I haven't been able, in my research, I haven't been able to find much that I found stuff that supports this. That in terms of careers for women at the time, being a funeral director wasn't one of those options.
Mm-hmm.
So they did things. They went to college. They pursued different careers, got married, had children. But so for them, it never. If I don't think it was ever a choice. For my brothers and I, my brother was born in 1940. I was born in 50. My other brother was born in 51. It was more of a choice. We had the option. My uncle and dad never really intentionally recruited us or did things to say we've started this for you, now you're going to take it over. We always had the message that this is there for you if you want to pursue it.
Mm-hmm.
But we want you to have the experiences of your schooling, other careers, other interests, and that's really what happened. Myself, I thought about it, and I knew where I could go to school if I wanted to get an undertaking degree.
Mm-hmm.
But I pursued a bachelor's degree in political science and education and became a teacher. My older brother, he became a banker and a finance person.
Mm-hmm.
And my younger brother became a business owner and a contractor building. So, but we've talked about, though, just how the skills we observed in my uncle and my dad have affected us in all our careers. So, and for myself, it's just being a teacher, a principal, educator, the idea of that whole aspect of being of service, of being in a role where people are counting on you to provide, and as an educator, being able to do things spontaneously as well as planned. Certainly, I learned that from my dad and my uncle, that and watching them, how they cared for and treated people.
Mm-hmm.
I learned those skills from them, and employed those through my college years and into starting my career and up to my retirement 3 years ago from education. So up to the time I was 70. So,
Mm-hmm.
But there was always, I mean, even in the lighter side, as a school principal, we had a lot of events at our elementary school, of course. Oftentimes, as the principal, I was setting up and taking down chairs and arranging, getting ready for a program. And oftentimes I'd think, hey, Kev, this is like you did in the funeral home. You were getting ready for funerals and wakes and moving furniture around, getting ready for people to come to your house. In this case, it was getting ready to come to my school. So I would rib myself a little bit with my doctorate in education and being a principal, and still, hey, Kev, you're still taking down and setting up chairs. Just like you did as a kid.
Yeah.
So I mean that's just the physical thing, but certainly in the emotional part and connecting with people and Relationship wise, I learned so much from the funeral industry. So much.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, how those basic skills translate into whatever you go into. So your career being very different from your brother's, but still learning
Yeah.
those people skills and hospitality skills, from your father and from
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
uncle. Yeah.
Yeah. And I dare say all of my both my brothers are active in community organizations and not only civic but business and bringing people together and organizing and taking leadership roles and things. So we've all ended up doing things like that, and I think that was just part of what we learned from
Hmm.
my not only from my uncle and my dad, but also from my mom and my aunt. That's just how they operated the business, and we lived and breathed it. So we watched it all the time.
So you mentioned the stages in the upper floor, and you mentioned the fact that you and your cousins would play on the stage, and apparently that
Yeah, yeah.
became part of
Hmm.
what you continued to do after that.
Hmm. 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 Yeah, I didn't pursue it professionally, but yeah, in high school doing plays, and it was, and even even in the funeral home, I always our families were always having playing records and albums there in the 50s and 60s, oftentimes Broadway show tunes and popular singers. And at an early age, I got acquainted with musical scores and the idea of and my parents taking us to plays in the
Mhm.
suburbs and also in Chicago. And one of my young kid ideas of recreation was to play those songs and to sing and to dance. And sometimes when there wasn't a wake going on or a funeral going on, I would just take my cassette tape recorder and I'd go down to the funeral chapel. And it's in the book, I say, this was my stage, this was my venue. And I
Mm.
would turn that cassette player up and I might pretend I'm Tony from West Side Story or Curly from Oklahoma or something.
Hmm.
Um, or maybe even I'd pretend I was Mary Martin from Sound of Music, whatever it was at the time.
Yeah.
But I was always intrigued with those kind of music, and now in my adult life, I've just always pursued community theater. And when I was raising my kids, I did that. Or if people needed in a civic organization to have somebody sing, or even as a principal, some people called me the singing principal because I would engage the kids in song and do
Hmm.
stuff like that. And just recently, I did a play down here in Fort Lauderdale. They have a great community theater group that I'm involved in. So I started doing this. I've been doing this for I'd say almost 65, 70 years, just dabbling in it and having fun with it, and that being another outlet for me, a creative outlet for me.
Hmm.
So, but that I get that from my parents and my aunt and uncle because they always had music playing, and I talk about that in the book. There's always music going on, either on a record or playing the piano, or people singing, or family gatherings, or taking us to plays. Or dad would work on sets and do stuff like that. Mom would be a director of a play.
Hmm.
Dad would be a director. I mean, so that was an influence for us all along, all along. So
So
it was wonderful.
I know a big part of your book is preserving and moving forward your family legacy. So tell me about how the letters came together to
Mm.
organize this.
Thank you for that question. Yeah. Well, one of the motivating forces to write the book was knowing I had all these stories in my head and knowing that from my mom and dad and aunt and uncle, there are now about, at last count, I think we're at 152 offspring. I think we're in the maybe even great grandchildren part from my aunt and uncle. But we're getting there. So I knew the other mission was I wanted to tell people these stories. And as my generation is dying off more, I thought, hey, we all have our stories, but somebody would say, Kevin, who's gonna write these stories down? So that
Mm.
was part of my motivation. But the other incentive was from family letters that had been sent back and forth when people used to write letters.
Right.
And that would I've got a letter in there. I think the earliest one is from 1939 when my mother wrote. We have a a letter that she wrote to her parents on the night of her honeymoon, just telling them thank you for their wedding and thank you for all that. So that's probably I've got a couple that are earlier than that, but that's the one I start with in the book. And then in this one, as I got going to, and then when my three cousins moved away, had their families, they would write letters and write back and forth. So there's those letters that went back and forth. And then as I got into going away to college in 1968, that's the bulk of the letters are from the years 68 to 72, 73. And just letters that my mom and dad, aunt and uncle wrote to me, whether I was at school in Chicago or I had also a year that I went to school as a junior in Rome, Italy. And then when I graduated, I moved to San Francisco in the Bay Area. So the letters went back and forth. And I saved the letters that they sent to me. They in turn, and my mom, I have a point in the book where mom writes me in 1970 when I'm a student in Rome. And she said, we're saving all these letters. And she said, someday, I wrote her back and I said, that's great, Mom. I'll save the ones you send me too. Maybe someday we'll be able to read them to each other. Lo and behold, in 2010, my mom is in failing health and she's unable to hold a book in her hand anymore, but she still loves to be read to. So I was sitting with her on her terrace. She was living the last few months of her life in Hallandale Beach, Florida, and she had a terrace overlooking the ocean. And so we're out there one day, and I said, Mom, maybe I'll just read to you from these notebooks of letters that I have. And I just I opened them up rather randomly. And in this random fashion, I went to the letter that she had written me in 1970, telling me, I'm going to save your letters. And my return was in there too. Yeah, someday we're going to be able to read these out loud to each other. Wow. I know I had goosebumps on my arms, and I looked at my mom, and she died about 3 months later. But at that time she was crying. She said, isn't it amazing that this really happened? So the letters became a treasure trove. And so as I, in the early, maybe around 2005 or six, somewhere about that, I had all these letters in boxes and folders and file folders. By the time I did that reading session with my mom, I had them organized into notebooks. And what I did is I had taken all the letters and I had just laid them out at random and then started organizing them by year. I think I started with decade, and then I went decade down to year, and then year and the month and the day. And then I just put them all in sequence in a notebook. I still have them. So now I have 5 4-inch wide 3-ring binders, which hold all these letters that are preserved in plastic sleeves, and with the envelopes in a lot of cases and the postmarks and all that too. So a lot of the stories in the book are each chapter is either launched due to one of these letters, or I'll reference the letter if I'm talking about a certain theme or a certain aspect in the book. The other thing I talk about in the book, since I know the audience is also people that are younger, and I was writing it for our progeny, our 150 offspring. A lot of them don't have any concept what letter writing is, And so I make reference and point out, hey, this is the way our family and many families communicated. We didn't have email. We didn't have the expeditiousness of a text. Our routine at home was to go to the mail at 10:30 every day and in the house and look forward to what was there. And certainly it was your bills and your flyers and business. But then there was letters there too, and notes and cards. And I kid my 39-year-old son now. I'll say, hey, I sent you a card. Did you get it? He said, oh, I haven't checked my mailbox in about 2 weeks. So,
Yeah.
I mean, there isn't even an interest in doing it. And where it was for us in our house at that time, it was a lifeblood. It was more than a routine. It was something that, well, the business depended on it, the mail, but also for the correspondence. And so to put those letters together and get them organized, and 700 pages of it turned out to be about 700 pages that I have in these notebooks of letters, and it's for me it's a wonderful thread that takes the stories. And in my book, I decided early on as I was writing, hey, this is not a book that's going to, like some memoirs are. I was born in this year, and then the next thing that happened to me and everything. When I got out of diapers, no, I didn't. I didn't do that part.
Right.
As I looked at the letters and started to lay out all the things that were happening in my thoughts and in the letters, a lot of themes started to come out. So the book is based on themes, and there is some sequence to the book, but it intertwines itself with the themes that are going on in our family, and themes of family togetherness, and themes of crises, and themes of joy, but also themes of sadness, and themes of even with the 1960s and 70s, there's a whole chapter on hair, because with the advent of the Beatles and hairstyles changing, especially for men at that time, boys, that was a big deal in our house. And so that chapter is called "Give Me a Head of Hair," and just different things that happen in the family in regards to hair. Or almost all the adults in the house smoked, and that chapter, "Smoke Gets in Your Eyes," and how did they undo themselves for those addictions, and how it was a focus at the time of how the seriousness of smoke. And so those are some of the things, and then I weave different historical references throughout the book, whether it's the president at the time, or might be Vietnam, or the Nixon Watergate tapes, or just different things that were happening to give sort of a baseline to what's happening in our family with what's happening internationally or nationally as well.
So how's your family responded to the book?
Oh, well, I was telling you about my cousin who just died. She was one of my my readers, along with a few other people, and their reactions were always supportive. I mean, I was having her and my two brothers and a couple other cousins just read different sections, because I wanted to make sure that I was just to reassure myself that I was being authentic and I wasn't making anything up. Because sometimes the 70-year-old brain memory, I think it's clear, but I wanted to make sure. So no, the family's been very supportive. Last Christmas for the holidays, my brothers arranged to give all their grandchildren copies and children copies, and so we had a presentation during our holiday celebration where they all got a signed copy, and some of the kids have written me to say, I didn't know that, and thanks for telling me this, and that extends into other cousins and stuff too. So the family's been very receptive, and I'm almost to the point of asking, is there anything here you don't? It's printed now, but is there anything else I can correct in a newsletter that I send out? No, nobody has come forward with that. So I think we've all been pretty much in agreement, and I think now the family just treats it as a record, treats it as something that they can continue to pass on to their children. And if they get, I've had some people say, I went back to that chapter again because I wanted to make sure what you said. So it's sort of, I think there's a family tree embedded in the book. So, they'll go back there to say, oh, I forgot that's how we're related, or I forgot about that part. So it's the family's been really good about it, and very fun, and they're encouraging me to write another one. So I'm ready to go.
Awesome. So what have been the responses from the people, from your readers, just the general readers that have picked up the book?
Oh, okay. Let's see. Do I have something with me? Hold on for a second. Wait a minute.
Sure.
I was looking in this coffee shop. Usually I have some postcards here, but they're all gone, fortunately. So somebody took the postcards. Hope that. But the reaction of readers has just been, this recently I got a call from a high school social studies teacher
Hmm.
that I've kept sort of in contact with, but not. I've been out of high school more than 55 years. But he texted me and he said, "Hey, I got your number and I just read the book and I was making some connections. Can you give me a call?" And I get bits of feedback. So we had a great chat, about
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the when you look at the Amazon reader reviews, we got about close to 100 of those right now,
Mm-hmm.
and just different people's saying. One person said, "Hey, the house itself is like a character," and the way I describe the house and how, if I say that in a different kind of physical house setting, our families may not have built the kind of relationships we had. The
Mm-hmm.
house itself becomes a character. I've had a couple people write to me or in reviews say, "Hey, this is like the real 6 Feet Under family." I'm not sure if you're familiar with that HBO series of about 20 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
6 Feet Under.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get feedback from that way, and also when I'm checking in with some of the people that are still talking about 6 Feet Under online, I'll let them know that I have this book, and then they'll write back to me, because I think our family is a little less quirky than the family on 6 Feet Under. But anyway, it talks about how a family business works.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that's I've gotten some interesting reactions. One of the if on Amazon, when books sell, they get different rankings, and the rankings could change in a day because even one if you sell one more book, it's gonna might change your rankings and things,
Mm-hmm.
and also the categories you're listed in. I think maybe you've got a book yourself, you probably know that, but the idea that for a while I was getting rated in the top 10 and 20 for teen and young adult readers. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool.
Hmm.
When I first marketed the book, I figured the demographic was more like 40 to death,
Right. Yeah.
the readers. But so what I've taken to realize in talking to other people is teens and young adults might focus, they're intrigued with the idea of being raised and living in a funeral home.
Mm-hmm.
They're also intrigued, and some of them, it's also been ranked for entrepreneurs and business owners, because I spent some time in the book weaving in stories about how my dad and uncle marketed the business,
Mm-hmm.
especially a brand new business in 1930. How do you do that? Well, some of those lessons that are in there could be applied to entrepreneurs now. And I think maybe that's another reason. So it's been an unexpected audience for the book, and one that I'm working on to try to get in front of people of that age, to do that and talk about how did people start a business in 1930 in the midst of the Depression. If they could do it in 1930 and the business was a funeral home, think what you could do in 100 years later in 2023. So that's been another fun thing in terms of the audience beyond the family. Has been really fun to watch and see how that evolves. And when I get in front of people and stuff too, it's good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome. So as you've, over the decades since you lived, in the funeral home and as you've grown and I'm sure probably experience, I know you've lost cousins and your parents and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel? How is your view on grief or losing people? How has that evolved over the period of time?
Well, I'm gonna take your question and sort of dovetail it into other things I've heard you talk about with other guests,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to share a couple of things that how the people that have passed before me are still with me. And I know that's a topic that what was it? Who was the person I listened to recently? Got to put my glasses on. Oh, not only near death, yeah, the near death experiences talk, but also just when your guest Edmund Grinnan was talking about Alzheimer's and
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
and people that have passed on before him. Well, my father, and I talk about this in the book. The couple days before my father died, he was with hospice in his own home, and at that time, my children were 2 and 6 months, just very young. And I took them over to the house, my parents' house, and I just laid the two of them next to my father, who was in and out. He was conscious in and out.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Oh, I'm so great to have the boys laying here next to me." And he said, "Hey, Kev, we got to get that condo sold." Story being that my wife and I and the kids were in a condo, but we were trying to sell it so we could get a bigger house. This is 1984, and we had been on the market almost a year, and we hadn't had one person look at the place. I'd have to go back and see what the real estate market conditions were at the time. I don't remember. But at the time, so this particular evening, I told my dad, I said, "Well, hey, this week we got a new realtor. We decided that we'd switch over to a new realtor.
Mm-hmm.
Her name's Cindy, and she's working on it." He said, "Oh, that'll be good." Then he said one of his last words to me was, "We have to get that place sold so you can find something else." We. So that was Friday night. I didn't. He died Sunday morning at 7:00, and I didn't see him on Saturday. So Tuesday is the wake, and I'm standing in line, and Cindy, the realtor, comes through the line, and she's talking to me, and she's, "Kev, I think I might have somebody interested in your house, in your condo." I said, "Wait a minute." I said, "This place, you just took it over. This place has been on the market for a year. We haven't had a nibble." And she says, "Well, I know you'll be busy with the funeral tomorrow, but I'm going to show it to this prospect and see what he thinks." I said, "Okay, keep me posted." So I was busy the next day, of course, with the funeral. And Thursday after the next day, I get a call from her, and she says, this guy wants to make an offer." And I said, "Wait a minute." She says, "I think your dad is working on this." And she had never had the opportunity. I don't think she may have had the opportunity to meet my dad. I can't remember, but she says, "I think your dad's working on this." And when I think back to his last comment to me, "We have to get this place sold." I gotta believe that if he died on Sunday morning, he in his own way and that position he was taking found this person. He was a single man looking for a place to buy. I think Dad found him. I really do. and found, because then Cindy told me, she says, "Yeah, I heard in the office there was this young kid looking for a place to buy." And so, however, to this day, I still think that that's the reason it happened. That it was just Dad's interest in me, interest in his grandkids, his love for us, knowing that we were working pretty hard to get it sold. And then his last words to me, "We got to get this place sold."
Wow.
He took that "we" seriously, I think.
Right.
And by November of that year, he died in early September. By Thanksgiving of that year, we were in our house. We had sold our condo, bought a house, and moved. So I when I think of experiences like that, I don't know. I think this happens to a lot of people, and it's not uncommon. And you too have talked about. Was it the ice cream store that your daughter liked and stuff? Was it that? This is the place you drive by you used to go. Yeah. And you just feel a connection there and things.
Right.
And I think it's the people that have gone before us. I think they have a way of communicating, and I think if we listen and we pay attention, we're going to get those messages and stuff. But I think I'm not sure what your question was.
Well, it was about how your view of grief or loved ones, how that might have evolved over the years. So I'm curious, growing up with that industry, because you said your father your uncle didn't really bring it home, but did they talk to you about spirituality when you were younger, or what were your beliefs then?
Well, yeah, they talked to us. Not we were raised Catholic.
Okay.
So that's, at that time that was pretty serious, regular church going, and every Sunday, and my cousins and my brothers and I all went to parochial school for elementary and high school. So we all had that influence on a daily basis.
Sure.
I mean, sometimes I would, in elementary school, they would take the kids who are altar boys like myself, and they would take us over to church to say we needed to, and they would call it serve the funeral and be the altar boys for the funeral.
Hmm.
And sometimes my dad and uncle would be the people that were doing the funeral. So
Right.
here I'm doing the church function and they're doing that. So no, and our family was very big on the religious, or in this case, Catholic, the
Hmm.
rituals and the routines and the beliefs and my uncle was very insistent that my brother and I become altar boys.
Hmm.
And I talk in the book about how he took us under his wing and worked with the nuns and the priests to know what to teach us and practice with us. And some of my fondest memories of my uncle are sitting in his lap learning how to say the Latin prayers.
Mm.
So for whatever reason he took on that role, and my dad didn't. I don't know. I think it was all set up that my uncle was doing it because he wanted to make this a surprise for my mom and dad.
Hmm.
So he took us under his wing and did that. So yeah, I have, felt that kind of presence, that ritual, knowing my dad and uncle were always ushers, and dad was active at church doing decorating and helping wherever he could. Church was a big part of the life. The parish was a big part of their life. And I had that kind of influence
Okay.
from a spiritual sense. So, and doing things like we called them May altars in May for the Blessed Virgin, and doing
Hmm.
all those kind of things that Dad would help with, and being a parochial school student, you did those kind of things. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Great. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your family with us and your family's legacy and your book. Remind people of the name of your book and where they
sure,
can get it. And if people can reach out to you if they have questions or want to contact you, let them know that information as well.
yeah, yeah. I think you'll put this in the liner notes as well, I
Yeah.
presume, too.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Well, people can get a hold of me in a few ways. One is to go to my website. It's KevinO'ConnorAuthor.com, and it's you can. That's one way to go.
Hmm.
And the other thing is to just, if they go to uh, Amazon, they
Hmm.
can just type in the title, Two Floors Above Grief. And that's the only title that pops up. And so they can go there to learn more about the book. And there's more detail about different synopsises of the book and
Hmm.
people that have written some reviews and reviewers to tell you a little more about the background. That's there too. The other thing, my phone, people can contact me just through text at 815-546-1076. So those are three ways that they can get a hold of me directly. A lot of times with people's permission, what I do is I have them sign up for a newsletter that I put out, uh, and that comes out usually every Friday or Saturday, and it
Hmm.
just talks about what's going on with the book. We're having we're coming up on the 1 year anniversary, so we're going to have a first year anniversary Zoom celebration in early
Nice.
December, and I keep up with people about what events I'm going to this weekend. We're going to the Miami Book Fair, so we'll be there, and I'll meet people that way. And there's different local events I do, or when I'm traveling, I try to make contact with a bookstore or a coffee shop and meet there. So I'm on the road, and then we have another thing that's called "Where on Earth is Two Floors Above Grief?" So I will put that as detail some of that in the newsletter.
Mm.
Also, I ask friends if they're taking a trip, if they can squeeze the book into their luggage, or they can use their Kindle. But if they happen to be reading the book at some place they're traveling to, like a friend of mine was in Scotland 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he took pictures of the book at different locations in Scotland. Some of my granddaughters took the book to Madrid and posed it in different ways and things like
Cool.
that. So that's
Nice.
Where on Earth is Two Floors Above Grief. So I just want my community of readers and people that are interested in to have fun with it, like I'm having fun with it. I mean, Not all the book is fun, but
Yeah.
I get in, like you use the word poignancy, and there's stories, different stories of the people that died in the family and how we dealt with it. In fact,
Hmm.
the last 7 chapters are all about the people that have preceded me in death, and what their funerals were like and what their last days were like.
Hmm.
I stole that idea from 6 Feet Under a little bit,
Yeah. Yeah.
but just to do that and how we experienced it at those times. So that's what I do. So those are the ways they can hear more from me or get a hold of the book, and I encourage them to do it, and I hope they have they enjoy it. Oh, the Audible version is out now too. So
Awesome. Yeah.
I didn't narrate it myself, but you can get the Audible version just by going to Amazon as well. And if they want to support their local bookstores, whether it be a independent store or a Barnes and Noble, any one of those places they can go to and just give the title, and they can order it from the store. The stores, a lot of times in the self-publishing world, uh, the stores don't carry self-published authors. But
Yeah.
if a person wants the book, they can just order it. And this, I haven't heard of a store yet that that didn't order it for people. So that's good
Great.
too.
Great. Well, again, Kevin, thanks so much for being here today.
Brian, I appreciate, and I really enjoy your podcast. I want to keep listening to them as I'm walking and doing stuff, because you certainly have a great array, I guess, of guests and the people that you welcome into your room. It's very nice.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Hey, thanks a lot. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Hi there. I hope you enjoyed this latest episode of the podcast, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. What questions came up for you? What did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? I invite you to visit us at grief2growth.circle.so. That's grief2growth.circle.so to continue the conversation with me and with other listeners. It's a space to sound off, to share reactions, and to go deeper into the topics from the show. I look forward to chatting more, and I hope to see you there.